The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Kensington Palace as Kate Middleton stood before her bedroom window, watching the world slowly wake up. She pressed her palm against the cool glass, her wedding ring catching the light. 3 children slept peacefully down the hall, unaware that their mother's world was quietly crumbling. The diagnosis had come 6 weeks ago. The words still echoed in her mind like a broken record. Stage 4, aggressive, limited time. The royal physicians had delivered the news with clinical precision, their faces masks of professional composure. But Kate had seen the flicker of helplessness in their eyes, the way they avoided looking directly at her when they spoke about treatment options and timelines. She had asked for time. Time to process, time to plan, time to find the right moment to tell William. The man who had stood by her side through every royal protocol, every public scrutiny, every moment of doubt about whether a commoner could truly become a princess. How do you tell the future king of England that his wife, the mother of his children, was dying? The palace buzzed with its usual morning activity. Staff members hurried through corridors, preparing for another day of royal duties. Kate's private secretary knocked softly on her door, reminding her about the charity event scheduled for that afternoon. A children's hospital visit, ironically. Kate had almost laughed at the cruel coincidence when she first saw it on her calendar. She dressed carefully, choosing an emerald green dress that William had always loved. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied her makeup, covering the dark circles that had become her constant companion since the sleepless nights began. The face in the mirror looked back at her with determined composure, the same expression she had worn through countless public appearances. William was already in his study when she found him, reviewing speeches and correspondence. The morning light highlighted the premature gray threads in his hair, evidence of the weight he carried as second in line to the throne. He looked up as she entered, his face brightening with the warm smile that had first captured her heart at university. "Good morning, darling," he said, rising to kiss her cheek. "Sleep well." The lie came easily. Wonderfully. She had perfected the art of deception over the past weeks, hiding the pain that sometimes doubled her over when she was alone, concealing the medication she took when he wasn't looking, explaining away her decreased appetite as stress from their packed schedule. They sat together over breakfast, discussing the children's school activities and upcoming royal engagements. George had a football match next week. Charlotte was excelling in her art classes, and little Louis was finally sleeping through the night. Normal conversations about their normal life, while Kate's secret sat between them like an invisible wall. The irony wasn't lost on her. She who had spent years learning to be perfectly composed in public, to never show a crack in the royal facade, was now using those same skills to hide the most important truth of their marriage. Every smile was calculated, every gesture measured, every word chosen carefully to maintain the illusion that everything was fine. William reached across the table to squeeze her hand, and Kate's heart clenched. His touch was warm, familiar, loving. Soon, these simple moments would become memories. She memorized the feel of his fingers intertwined with hers, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh when she made a dry observation about the morning's headlines. After breakfast, they walked through the palace gardens together, a routine they had maintained since their early married days. The roses were in full bloom, their fragrance heavy in the air. Kate stopped beside a particularly beautiful white rose bush, one they had planted together after George's birth. "Do you remember when we planted these?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. William nodded, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You insisted on doing it yourself, even though the gardeners were horrified. You got soil under your fingernails and ruined that white dress." "I didn't mind," Kate said softly. "I wanted to plant something that would grow with our children, something that would be here long after." She caught herself before finishing the sentence. William didn't notice the slip, lost in the memory of that happy day. Kate leaned back against his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat against her spine. She wanted to turn around and tell him everything, to share this burden that was crushing her spirit. But the words stuck in her throat. The morning flew by in a blur of meetings and preparations. Kate moved through her duties with practiced efficiency, smiling for photographers, making small talk with staff, reviewing her notes for the hospital visit. Her private secretary remarked on how well she looked, how radiant she seemed. Kate accepted the compliment with gracious thanks, not mentioning that the glow was fever, carefully concealed with makeup and determination. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Kate caught sight of herself in a hallway mirror. The woman looking back seemed like a stranger, sophisticated, composed, every inch a princess. But Behind her eyes lurked a desperate sadness that no amount of royal training could completely hide. William appeared beside her reflection, adjusting his tie. Their eyes met in the mirror, and, for a moment, Kate thought she saw a flicker of concern cross his face. Had he noticed something? The weight loss she had tried to disguise with carefully chosen clothing? The way she sometimes paused mid-conversation, lost in thought? The fact that she had stopped making plans beyond the immediate future? "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. Kate took it, drawing strength from his solid presence. "Ready," she replied, though she had never felt less prepared for anything in her life. The car ride to the hospital was filled with comfortable silence. Kate watched London pass by the window, ordinary people going about their ordinary lives. A mother pushing a stroller, a businessman checking his phone, teenagers laughing together outside a coffee shop. All of them blessed with the luxury of assuming they had time, that tomorrow would come as surely as today had. Kate had once been like them, planning years ahead, discussing where they might vacation next summer, talking about what they would do when the children were grown. Now, she measured time in weeks, in days, in moments like these when she could sit beside her husband and pretend that their future stretched endlessly before them. The hospital came into view, its modern facade gleaming in the afternoon sun. Kate straightened her shoulders and summoned her public smile. For the next few hours, she would be the Princess of Wales, bringing joy and hope to sick children and their families. The irony was almost unbearable, children fighting for their lives while she, who appeared perfectly healthy, was quietly losing her own battle. As their car pulled up to the entrance, Kate saw the crowd of photographers and well-wishers gathered outside. The familiar surge of cameras, the calls of Catherine, Catherine, from the crowd. She waved gracefully, her smile never wavering, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. William took her hand as they walked toward the hospital entrance, and Kate squeezed it tightly. She wanted to memorize everything about this moment, the feel of his hand in hers, the way he instinctively shortened his stride to match hers, the proud way he looked at her when she stopped to accept flowers from a little girl in the crowd. These were the moments that mattered. Not the grand ceremonies or state dinners, but the simple act of walking hand in hand with the man she loved, facing whatever came next together, even if he didn't know yet what they were really facing. Inside the hospital, children's laughter echoed through the corridors, a sound that should have brought joy but instead made Kate's chest tighten with emotion. These brave little ones, fighting battles they were too young to understand, while their parents watched helplessly from bedside chairs. Kate knew she would soon understand that helplessness from both sides. As they were led through the pediatric wing, Kate found herself studying the faces of the parents they passed. She saw her own future reflected in their eyes, the sleepless nights, the desperate hope, the way love could become both a strength and a source of unbearable pain. Soon, William would wear that same expression, and it would be her fault for waiting too long to prepare him. But not today. Today, she would smile and laugh with the children, bring a moment of magic to their difficult journeys, and continue the careful deception that was breaking her heart a little more with each passing hour. The afternoon stretched ahead like a beautifully choreographed performance, and Kate stepped onto the stage of her public role, pushing her private anguish deep beneath the surface where no camera could capture it. The children's ward at St. Mary's Hospital buzzed with carefully orchestrated activity as Kate and William made their way through the brightly painted corridors. Nurses had spent hours preparing for their visit, ensuring every detail was perfect. But Kate barely noticed the colorful decorations or the eager faces of the staff lined up to greet them. Her mind was consumed with a different kind of preparation. In the first room they visited, a 6-year-old girl named Emma lay surrounded by teddy bears and get-well cards. Her bald head was covered with a bright pink scarf, and her smile was radiant despite the tubes and machines that monitored her tiny body. Kate sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her heart breaking as she listened to Emma chatter excitedly about her favorite princess movies. "Are you really a princess?" Emma asked with wide eyes. Kate smiled, tucking a strand of the child's absent hair behind her ear in a gesture that came naturally. "I am, sweetheart. And do you know what makes someone truly royal?" Emma shook her head, hanging on Kate's every word. "Being brave, just like you are every single day," Kate said softly. "That makes you more of a princess than any crown ever could." Emma's mother sat in the corner, tears streaming silently down her face. Kate recognized the expression immediately, the desperate gratitude mixed with overwhelming fear that came with watching your child fight for their life. Soon, her own children would sit in hospital chairs, watching her fade away, and William would wear that same haunted look. As they moved through the ward, Kate found herself drawn to each child's story with an intensity that surprised even her. 7-year-old Marcus, who was learning to walk again after brain surgery, took her hand and showed her his physical therapy exercises. 10-year-old Sophia, fighting leukemia for the second time, presented Kate with a drawing she had made of the royal family. Each interaction carved deeper into Kate's heart, reminding her of how precious and fragile life truly was. William watched his wife with obvious pride as she connected with each child. He had always admired her natural ability to put people at ease, to make everyone feel seen and valued. Today, there seemed to be an extra depth to her compassion, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what was different. "You're particularly wonderful with them today," he whispered as they walked between rooms. Kate's step faltered for just a moment. "They remind me how lucky we are," she replied, which wasn't exactly a lie. Every moment with their healthy, vibrant children was a gift she was only now learning to fully appreciate. In the playroom, a group of young patients had gathered to meet them. Some were in wheelchairs, others attached to portable four-drips, but all were excited beyond measure to see real royalty. Kate sat on the floor without regard for her expensive dress, joining a game of building blocks with 3 children who were between chemotherapy treatments. "My mummy cries sometimes," confided 5-year-old Jake, carefully placing a red block on top of their tower. "She thinks I don't see, but I do." "Do your mummies and daddies ever cry?" The innocent question hit Kate like a physical blow. She thought of her own children, of the tears they would soon shed, of the questions they would ask that she wouldn't be there to answer. "Sometimes grown-ups cry because they love you so much it fills up their whole heart," Kate said gently. "Your mummy cries because you're the most important thing in her whole world." Jake nodded solemnly, as if this explanation made perfect sense. "Will you tell her it's okay? That I'm not scared?" Kate's throat tightened, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "I think she would love to hear that from you." As the afternoon progressed, Kate began to notice things she might have missed before. The way the hospital staff moved with quiet efficiency around families facing the unthinkable. The support groups meeting in small rooms, parents sharing their fears and hopes with others who understood. The siblings of sick children, trying to be brave while their world revolved around hospital visits and whispered conversations. In the adolescent wing, she met 16-year-old David, who was scheduled for a risky surgery the following week. He was trying to maintain a casual attitude, but Kate could see the fear behind his bravado. His parents flanked his bedside, their hands clasped so tightly their knuckles were white. "Are you scared?" Kate asked him directly, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from his mother. David considered the question seriously. "Yeah, I am. But I figure being scared is okay as long as you don't let it stop you from doing what you have to do." His words resonated deeply within Kate. She had been letting fear stop her from telling William the truth, from preparing their children, from having the conversations that needed to happen. This teenager, facing an uncertain future with more courage than she had managed to summon, was teaching her something about bravery. "You're absolutely right," she told him. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're scared and do what needs to be done anyway." David grinned, and Kate saw a glimpse of the confident young man he was beneath the hospital gown and medical equipment. "Maybe I should put that on my university application essays, if I get to write them." "When you write them," Kate corrected firmly. "When, not if." The certainty in her voice surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She couldn't promise David his future, just as no one could promise her own. But she could give him hope, and sometimes hope was the most powerful medicine of all. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Kate lingered in the corridor, reluctant to return to the pretense that awaited her at home. The sounds of the ward continued around them, beeping monitors, quiet conversations, the occasional laugh from the playroom. These were the sounds of life continuing in the face of uncertainty, of love persisting despite fear. William noticed her hesitation. "You seem particularly affected by today's visit," he observed. Kate looked at him, this man who knew her so well yet remained unaware of the storm brewing beneath her surface. "Children have a way of putting everything in perspective," she said carefully. "They face things that would break most adults, and they do it with such grace." "You have that same grace," William said, touching her face gently. "It's one of the things I've always admired about you." The tenderness in his voice nearly undid her completely. She leaned into his touch, memorizing the feel of his hand against her cheek. Soon, these casual gestures of affection would become precious beyond measure. On the drive back to the palace, Kate stared out the window at the London streets, but her mind was back in those hospital rooms. She thought about Emma's bright smile despite her illness, Marcus's determination to walk again, David's honest acknowledgement of his fear. Each of those children was facing their situation head-on, with support from the people who loved them. She was doing the opposite, hiding, protecting, trying to shoulder her burden alone. But, watching those families today, she realized that love wasn't about protecting someone from difficult truths. It was about facing those truths together, drawing strength from each other when individual strength wasn't enough. Back at Kensington Palace, their own children rushed to greet them. George, now 11 and nearly as tall as his mother, regaled them with stories from his football practice. 8-year-old Charlotte showed off a painting she had completed that afternoon, while 5-year-old Louis climbed into Kate's lap, still young enough to demand and receive unlimited cuddles. Kate held Louis tightly, breathing in his little boy's scent of grass stains and strawberry jam. George and Charlotte chattered about their day, their voices bright with the confidence of children who had never known real worry. They took for granted that their parents would always be there, that their family was unbreakable, that tomorrow would come wrapped in the same security as today. During dinner, the family discussed plans for the upcoming summer holidays. William suggested they might visit Scotland, where they could hike and fish and escape the pressures of royal life for a few weeks. The children were immediately excited, debating whether they should stay at Balmoral or rent a cottage somewhere more private. Kate listened to their animated planning with a mixture of joy and heartbreak. She wanted desperately to look forward to that summer, to picture herself walking hand in hand with William through Scottish meadows while their children explored and played. But her doctors had been clear about timelines, about what to expect as her condition progressed. "What do you think, Mummy?" Charlotte asked, noticing her mother's quiet contemplation. "Should we go to the beach or the mountains?" Kate smiled, pushing aside her dark thoughts. "I think anywhere we're all together will be perfect," she said, which was absolutely true, even if their definition of together might be different by then. After the children were tucked into bed, Kate found herself in Louis's room, watching him sleep. His small face was peaceful, one hand curled around his favorite stuffed lion. She thought about all the milestones she might miss: his first day of school, learning to ride a bike, his teenage years, his wedding day. The weight of those lost futures pressed down on her chest like a physical force. William appeared in the doorway, following her nightly routine of checking on each child one final time. "He looks just like you did at that age," Kate whispered, not wanting to wake their youngest. William wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching their son sleep. These quiet moments of family intimacy were what Kate treasured most about their life together. Not the public ceremonies or grand occasions, but simple times like this when they were just parents watching over their children. "We're lucky," William murmured into her hair. "So very lucky," Kate agreed, leaning back against his chest. The word lucky tasted bitter in her mouth, but she meant it. They had been blessed with years of love, 3 beautiful children, and moments like this that would sustain them through whatever darkness lay ahead. As they prepared for bed, Kate made a decision. The children at the hospital had shown her something about courage, about facing difficult truths with grace and honesty. Tomorrow, she would find the right moment to tell William. She owed him that much, owed their children the chance to prepare, owed herself the relief of sharing this burden. But tonight, she would lie beside her husband and listen to him breathe, storing up the memory of these last peaceful hours before their world changed forever. Dawn broke gray and drizzling over London, matching the heavy weight that had settled in Kate's chest overnight. She had lain awake for hours, rehearsing different ways to tell William the truth, each scenario playing out like a nightmare in her mind. How do you destroy someone's world with words? How do you speak the unspeakable? William had already left for an early morning meeting at Clarence's house, giving Kate a few precious hours to gather her courage. She walked through their private apartments like a ghost, touching familiar objects as if seeing them for the last time. The family photographs arranged on the mantelpiece, each one capturing moments of joy and laughter. The books they had read together, pages marked with shared memories. The children's artwork displayed proudly on the refrigerator, innocent expressions of a safe and happy world. Her phone buzzed with a message from her oncologist, Dr. Harrison. The latest test results were in, and they needed to discuss adjustments to her treatment plan. Kate stared at the screen, the clinical language barely masking the urgency behind it. Time was accelerating faster than anyone had hoped, and decisions needed to be made quickly. She made the call from her private sitting room. The door closed against any possibility of interruption. Dr. Harrison's voice was gentle but direct as she explained the progression they had observed. The treatments they had hoped would buy more time were proving less effective than anticipated. They needed to consider more aggressive options, which would mean hospital stays and side effects that would be impossible to hide. How long? Kate asked, the question that had haunted her for weeks finally spoken aloud. With aggressive treatment, we might gain several months, possibly longer. But I have to be honest with you, Catherine. The treatments will significantly impact your quality of life. You need to consider what's most important to you and your family. Kate closed her eyes, absorbing the weight of choice. Fight aggressively and spend her remaining time sick and hospitalized, or focus on making the time she had left meaningful for her children. The decision seemed impossible, yet somehow she already knew what she would choose. I need to talk to my husband first, she said quietly. Of course. But, Catherine, we can't wait much longer to make this decision. After ending the call, Kate sat in silence, watching the rain streak down her windows. The normal sounds of palace life continued around her, staff preparing for the day, gardeners tending to the grounds despite the weather, the distant hum of London waking up. None of them knew that their princess was quietly planning her goodbye. Charlotte found her there an hour later, padding into the room in her school uniform, her hair still messy from sleep. "Mummy, you look sad," she observed with the devastating honesty of an 8-year-old. "Are you okay?" Kate pulled her daughter onto her lap, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "Just thinking about important things, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups need quiet moments to figure things out." Charlotte studied her mother's face with serious eyes. "Is it about work? You and Daddy are always talking about work things." "Something like that," Kate said, smoothing Charlotte's hair. "But, right now, I'm just happy to have snuggles with my favorite girl." They sat together in comfortable silence, Charlotte's small body warm and solid against her mother's chest. These simple moments of maternal love were what Kate treasured most precious, ordinary interactions that she had once taken for granted. Now, she tried to memorize every detail: the weight of Charlotte in her arms, the feel of her silky hair, the way she hummed softly to herself. "Mummy," Charlotte said suddenly, "will you always take care of me?" The question pierced straight through Kate's heart. Children asked these things innocently, seeking reassurance about their security in the world. They couldn't know how their simple words could devastate a parent who was facing the reality of leaving them behind. "I will always love you," Kate said carefully, "more than all the stars in the sky. And love doesn't go away, even when people can't be together." Charlotte seemed satisfied with this answer, squirming down from her mother's lap to finish getting ready for school. Kate watched her go, marveling at the resilience of children, their ability to accept abstract concepts like eternal love without needing concrete promises about physical presence. George appeared next, rushing through the sitting room with his football gear, late, as usual. At 11, he was becoming more independent, less likely to seek out cuddles or casual conversation with his parents. Kate caught him by the arm as he hurried past. "Have I told you lately how proud I am of you?" she asked, straightening his school tie. George looked surprised by the sudden affection. Thanks, Mom. I haven't done anything special, though." "You don't have to do anything special," Kate said, cupping his face in her hands. "I'm proud of you just for being exactly who you are. You're kind and smart and funny, and you're going to grow up to be an amazing man." George squirmed slightly, embarrassed by the intensity of her emotion, but pleased nonetheless. "You're being weird today," he said, but he hugged her back when she pulled him close. "I love you, George. Remember that, always." "I love you too, Mom," he said, then rushed off to breakfast, leaving Kate alone with the echo of words that felt like both a blessing and a farewell. Little Louis was the last to find her, trailing his stuffed lion and looking for someone to help him with his shoes. At 5, he still needed assistance with the complicated laces, and Kate knelt beside him, taking her time with the simple task. "Can we go to the park today?" he asked, watching her fingers work the laces. "We'll see, sweetheart. It's raining pretty hard." "I don't mind rain," Louis said philosophically. "Rain makes puddles, and puddles are fun to jump in." Kate smiled at his simple wisdom. Children understood instinctively that joy could be found in the most ordinary circumstances, that happiness didn't require perfect conditions. "You're absolutely right," she said. "Maybe we'll go puddle jumping later." "Promise?" Louis asked, his eyes bright with anticipation. The word promise stuck in Kate's throat. How could she make promises about a future she might not share? I promise to try my very best, she said instead, which felt honest and possible. After the children left for school, the palace settled into its quieter daytime rhythm. Kate found herself wandering the halls, noticing details she had previously overlooked. The way morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting geometric patterns on the polished floors. The portraits of previous royals lining the corridors, their painted eyes seeming to watch her pass. The fresh flowers that were arranged daily throughout their apartments, bringing life and color to the formal spaces. She paused before a photograph that had been taken just 6 months ago at George's birthday party. The 5 of them were laughing at something Louis had said, their faces bright with unguarded joy. Kate remembered the moment clearly. William had been trying to light the candles while Louis helped by blowing them out as fast as they were lit. The photographer had captured them in a moment of pure family happiness, unaware that it might become one of their last complete family portraits. The sound of William's voice in the entrance hall pulled her from her reverie. He was back from his meeting, and she could hear him speaking with his private secretary about the afternoon schedule. The moment she had been dreading and anticipating was finally here. Kate made her way downstairs, her heart pounding with each step. She found William in his study, reviewing documents that were spread across his desk. He looked up as she entered, his face brightening with the warm smile that had first captivated her nearly 2 decades ago. "How was your morning?" he asked, setting aside his papers and giving her his full attention. "Quiet," she said, which was true in all the ways that mattered. "William, do you have a few minutes? There's something I need to discuss with you." Something in her tone must have alerted him because his expression shifted to one of gentle concern. "Of course. Is everything all right?" Kate closed the door behind her and took a seat across from his desk, the same chair she had occupied countless times over the years when they discussed everything from state dinners to school events. But this conversation would be different from any they had ever had. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "And I need you to let me get through it before you say anything." William nodded, though she could see the worry deepening in his eyes. He had always been attuned to her moods, able to sense when something was troubling her even when she tried to hide it. Kate took a deep breath, drawing on every ounce of strength she had cultivated through years of public speaking and royal duties. 6 weeks ago, I went to see Dr. Mitchell about some symptoms I'd been having. Fatigue, weight loss, other things I'd been attributing to stress. She watched William's face carefully as understanding began to dawn. His hands, which had been relaxed on his desk, slowly curled into fists. "After several tests, they referred me to an oncologist. Dr. Harrison at the Royal Marsden." Kate's voice remained remarkably steady, as if she were discussing something that was happening to someone else. "The diagnosis is stage 4 ovarian cancer. It's advanced, and it's aggressive." The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. William's face had gone completely white, and Kate could see him struggling to process what she was telling him. "The treatments we discussed would be intensive and would significantly impact quality of life. The prognosis, even with aggressive intervention, is measured in months rather than years." William's mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged. Kate had never seen him look so completely lost, so utterly unprepared for what life had thrown at them. "I wanted to tell you sooner," she continued, "but I needed time to understand what we were facing, to make some decisions about how we handle this. I didn't want to burden you with uncertainty while I was still gathering information." Finally, William found his voice. "6 weeks," he whispered. "You've been dealing with this alone for 6 weeks?" The pain in his voice was almost more than Kate could bear. "I wasn't ready to make it real by saying it out loud," she admitted. "As long as it stayed in my head, I could pretend it wasn't happening." William stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, and began pacing behind his desk. Kate could see him trying to process the information, to find some way to make sense of a world that had just shifted completely off its axis. "What did they say about treatment options?" he asked, his voice taking on the controlled tone he used when dealing with crisis situations. "What are we looking at in terms of hospitals, specialists, experimental treatments?" Kate had expected this response. William was a problem solver, someone who faced challenges head-on and found solutions. The idea that this problem might not have a solution would be harder for him to accept than the diagnosis itself. "We have options," she said carefully, "but they come with significant costs in terms of time and quality of life. I need us to think about what's best for the children, what's best for our family." William stopped pacing and looked at her directly. "What's best for our family is for you to fight this with everything we have. Money is no object. the best specialists in the world, experimental treatments, whatever it takes. Kate had known he would say this, had prepared for his determination to wage war against the disease. But she had also spent 6 weeks thinking about what kind of final months she wanted to have, what kind of memories she wanted to leave for her children. I know that's your instinct, she said gently. And we'll explore every option. But I also need you to understand that aggressive treatment might mean spending our remaining time in hospitals rather than at home with the children. The word remaining hit him like a physical blow. Kate watched as the full reality of what she was telling him finally sank in. This wasn't a problem to be solved or a crisis to be managed. This was goodbye, and all they could control was how they said it. William sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. When he looked up, there were tears in his eyes that he made no attempt to hide. How do we tell the children? He asked quietly. It was the question Kate had been dreading most, yet also the one that needed to be answered first. Everything else, their public duties, the media, the succession planning could wait. But their children deserved honesty, age-appropriate but truthful, delivered with love, and the promise that they would be supported through whatever came next. Together, Kate said simply. We tell them together, when we've figured out the right way to do it. For the first time since she had started speaking, Kate's composure cracked. Tears began to flow down her cheeks as the weight of actually sharing this burden lifted slightly from her shoulders. William was around the desk in an instant, pulling her into his arms, and together they cried for the future they were losing and the impossible conversation they would have to have with their children. The week that followed Kate's revelation passed in a blur of doctor's appointments, difficult conversations, and carefully maintained normalcy for the children. William threw himself into research with the desperate energy of someone who refused to accept defeat. Their private study became a war room, filled with medical journals, specialist consultations, and treatment protocols from around the world. Kate watched her husband's frenetic activity with a mixture of love and heartbreak. She understood his need to fight, to believe that somewhere in the maze of medical possibilities lay a solution that would save their family. But she had already begun the harder work of accepting what couldn't be changed and focusing on what could still be controlled. Dr. Harrison had been patient with their questions and William's insistence on second, third, and fourth opinions. Every specialist they consulted confirmed the original diagnosis and prognosis. The cancer was aggressive, had spread beyond the possibility of surgical intervention, and while treatment might extend her life by some months, the quality of those months would be severely compromised. On Friday afternoon, as rain drummed against the windows of their sitting room, Kate and William finally had the conversation they had been circling around all week. The children were at school, giving them privacy to discuss the impossible choices they faced. Dr. Chun at Johns Hopkins says there's a new immunotherapy protocol, William said, looking up from his laptop where he had been reviewing yet another research paper. The survival rates are promising, and the side effects are supposedly more manageable. Kate looked at her husband, noting the dark circles under his eyes, and the way his hands trembled slightly from too much caffeine and too little sleep. He had aged years in the past week, and she knew that watching her suffer through aggressive treatment would age him even more. William, she said gently, we need to talk about what I want. He stiffened, recognizing the tone in her voice. They had been dancing around this conversation, but Kate knew they couldn't avoid it any longer. I've been thinking about the children, she continued, about what kind of memories I want to leave them with. George is 11, he'll remember everything. Charlotte is 8, and Louis is only 5, but they'll both carry impressions of this time for the rest of their lives. William set down his laptop and gave her his full attention, though she could see him bracing himself for words he didn't want to hear. I can spend the next few months in and out of hospitals, sick from chemotherapy, connected to machines, fighting for every extra week, Kate said slowly. Or I can spend that time at home with our children, making sure they know how much they're loved, helping them understand what's happening, and giving them memories of their mother that aren't defined by illness. You're talking about giving up, William said, his voice rough with emotion. I'm talking about choosing how to spend whatever time I have left, Kate corrected. I'm not giving up, William. I'm choosing to fight for what matters most to me. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the decision settling between them. Kate knew she was asking him to accept something that went against every instinct he had as a husband and a future king. But she also knew that this choice was hers to make. What about hope, he asked finally. What about the possibility that treatments might work, that we might have longer than they're predicting? Kate reached for his hands, holding them firmly in hers. "I have hope," she said. "I hope for good days with you and the children. I hope for laughter and normal moments and the chance to see Charlotte's next school play and George's football matches. I hope for time to help you all prepare for what comes after. That's the kind of hope I can live with." William's shoulders sagged as he finally began to accept what she was telling him. The fight wasn't over, but the battlefield had shifted. Instead of waging war against the disease, they would focus on making their remaining time together as meaningful as possible. "How do we tell them?" he asked, the question that had been haunting them both. Kate had been thinking about this constantly, consulting with child psychologists and drawing on her own instincts as a mother. "Age appropriately, honestly, together," she said. "We tell them that Mummy is very sick, that the doctors can't make her better, but that we're going to have lots of love and special time together. We let them ask questions, and we answer them truthfully. What about Louis? He's so young." "Young children are often more resilient than we think," Kate said, remembering her conversations with the hospital children. "They understand love and presence better than they understand medical details. We focus on those things." That evening, after dinner, they gathered their children in the sitting room where Kate and William had shared so many family moments over the years. The children sensed something important was happening. Their parents had been having more hushed conversations lately, and there was a gravity in the air that even Louis could feel. Kate had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times in her mind, but sitting across from her three beautiful children, all the careful words seemed to evaporate. "How do you tell your babies that their world is about to change forever?" "We need to talk to you about something very important," William began, his voice steady despite the emotion Kate could see in his eyes. The children arranged themselves on the sofa, George sitting protectively between his younger siblings in a gesture that nearly broke Kate's heart. At 11, he was already developing the instincts of an older brother, sensing when his family needed him to be strong. "Mummy has been to see some doctors," Kate continued, "because I haven't been feeling very well lately. The doctors told us that I have something called cancer, which means I'm very sick." Charlotte's hand immediately went to her mouth, and Louis moved closer to George, though Kate wasn't sure he fully understood what they were saying yet. "Can the doctors make you better?" George asked, his voice careful and controlled in a way that reminded Kate painfully of William. "The doctors are going to help us make sure I'm as comfortable as possible," Kate said, choosing her words carefully. "But this is the kind of sick that the doctors can't make completely better." The silence that followed was deafening. Kate watched her children process this information, seeing the exact moment when understanding dawned on George's face. His expression crumpled, and she saw him struggling not to cry in front of his younger siblings. "Are you going to die?" Charlotte asked with the devastating directness that only children possess. Kate had prepared for this question, but hearing it spoken aloud in her daughter's small voice still felt like a punch to her chest. "Yes, sweetheart. That's what the doctors think will happen, probably in a few months." Louis began to cry, though Kate suspected he was responding more to the emotional atmosphere than to full comprehension of what they were discussing. She gathered him into her lap, while William moved to comfort Charlotte, who had started sobbing quietly. George sat rigidly on the sofa, his fists clenched in his lap. At 11, he was old enough to understand the finality of what they were telling him, but still young enough to need his mother's comfort. The contradiction was written clearly across his face. "This doesn't mean we stop having fun or doing things together," Kate said, trying to inject some hope into the devastating conversation. "It means we make sure to appreciate all the wonderful moments we have. We're going to have lots of special time together, and I'm going to help you understand that even when people can't be with us anymore, the love we share never goes away." "Will you still be here for my birthday?" Louis asked, his face streaked with tears. Kate's birthday was in 6 weeks, well within even the most pessimistic timeline the doctors had given her. "I wouldn't miss your birthday for anything," she promised, meaning every word. "What about Christmas?" Charlotte whispered. This was harder to answer. Christmas was 4 months away, and Kate honestly didn't know if she would see it. "I hope so," she said truthfully. "But even if I can't be there, Christmas will still be special because you'll all be together, and you'll remember all the Christmases we've shared." George finally broke down, his composure cracking as he threw himself into his mother's arms. Kate held her eldest son while Louis clung to her side, and William comforted Charlotte. They stayed like that for a long time, crying together as a family, beginning the process of grieving that would carry them through the months ahead. Later, after the children had been tucked into bed with extra stories and longer hugs, Kate and William sat together in their bedroom, emotionally exhausted, but somehow also relieved. The hardest conversation was behind them, and while there would be many difficult days ahead, they had taken the first step in facing this crisis together. "They're stronger than I expected," William said quietly. "Children usually are," Kate replied. "They'll surprise us with their resilience, and they'll help us find ways to be strong too." William pulled her closer, and they lay together in the dark, listening to the familiar sounds of the palace settling into night. Outside their window, London continued its endless rhythm, millions of people going about their lives without knowing that in this quiet room, a family was beginning to say goodbye. "I love you," William whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Kate whispered back. "And that's going to be enough to carry us through this." In the children's rooms down the hall, three young lives were beginning to process a reality too large for their small hearts to fully comprehend. But, wrapped in the security of their parents' love and the promise that they would face whatever came next together, they slept deeply, dreaming of tomorrow and all the precious moments it might bring. The palace around them held its secrets close, as it had for generations. But, within its walls, a family was learning that love could be both the source of the deepest pain and the foundation of the greatest strength. The countdown had begun, but so had the most important chapter of their lives together. 3 months later, autumn painted the gardens of Kensington Palace in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Kate stood at her bedroom window, wrapped in a soft cashmere shawl, watching the leaves dance in the October wind. The seasons had changed, and so had everything else. The decision to forego aggressive treatment had given their family something precious: time together without the haze of constant medical interventions. Kate's condition had progressed as the doctors predicted, but slowly enough that she had been present for all the moments that mattered. Louis's 6th birthday party, complete with a dinosaur cake and 20 giggling children. Charlotte's starring role as a woodland fairy in the school harvest festival. George's acceptance to the secondary school of his choice, a milestone that filled Kate with pride even as it broke her heart to think of all the school events she would miss. The public still didn't know. Kate and William had made the joint decision to keep her diagnosis private for as long as possible, allowing their children to process this enormous change without the additional pressure of media scrutiny. To the outside world, the Princess of Wales had simply reduced her public appearances due to a minor health issue that required rest. The palace press office had become masterful at deflecting questions while the family focused on what truly mattered. Their days had taken on a different rhythm. Mornings were often Kate's best time, when her energy was highest and the pain manageable. She would have breakfast with the children, help them prepare for school, and steal precious moments of normalcy before fatigue inevitably set in. Afternoons were for rest and quiet activities: reading together, working on photo albums, recording bedtime stories for future nights when her voice might not be strong enough. Evenings had become sacred. After the children were in bed, Kate and William would talk for hours, sometimes about practical matters: the children's education, financial arrangements, the careful choreography of royal succession. More often, they simply remembered their wedding day, when Kate had been so nervous she could barely speak her vows. The births of their children, each one a miracle that had changed them forever. Quiet holidays in Scotland, where they could be a normal family without the weight of royal protocol. Today was different, though. Kate could feel it in her bones, in the way her body seemed to be pulling inward, conserving energy for some final sprint. Dr. Harrison had increased her pain medication twice in the past week, and even with pharmaceutical help, the simplest tasks were becoming monumental efforts. William found her by the window, as he had countless times over their years together. Without saying anything, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood together watching the autumn garden. Kate leaned into his solid warmth, drawing strength from his presence. "The children are asking if you'll be well enough to come to George's rugby match this afternoon," he said softly. Kate closed her eyes, picturing her eldest son in his school uniform, hoping desperately that his mother would be in the stands cheering him on. She had promised herself that she would attend every event possible, that her children's memories would be filled with her presence rather than her absence. "Help me get ready," she said, though they both knew it would take considerable effort to manage even a short outing. William didn't argue, though she could feel his concern in the tension of his body behind her. He had learned not to try to protect her from these choices, understanding that being present for their children was more important to Kate than conserving energy. An hour later, Kate sat in the back of their car, carefully positioned against cushions to minimize discomfort. The journey to George's school took 20 minutes, and she used the time to apply makeup that would hide the worst evidence of her decline. The face that looked back at her from the compact mirror was gaunt, her cheekbones sharp where they had once been softly rounded. But her eyes were still bright with love and determination. The rugby pitch was crowded with parents and siblings, all bundled in autumn coats and scarves. Kate took William's arm as they made their way to the bleachers, moving slowly but steadily. Several other parents greeted them warmly, and Kate was grateful for their careful normalcy, their refusal to treat her like something fragile. When George spotted them in the crowd, his entire face lit up. Kate watched her son play with fierce pride, marveling at how tall he had grown, how confident he looked running across the field. At 11, he was becoming the young man he would be, and Kate felt a bittersweet satisfaction in witnessing this transformation. The match was close, George's team pulling ahead in the final minutes. When the whistle blew, signaling their victory, George looked immediately to the stands, searching for his parents' faces. Kate stood and cheered, ignoring the way the movement sent waves of pain through her abdomen. Her son's joy was worth any discomfort. After the match, George ran to them, still flushed with excitement and triumph. Kate hugged him tightly, breathing in his scent of grass stains and boyish sweat, storing the memory of his solid, healthy body in her arms. "Did you see my try?" he asked eagerly. "Every moment of it," Kate said, meaning far more than just the rugby play. "I was so proud of you out there." The drive home was quiet, Kate resting with her eyes closed while William handled the inevitable phone calls from their staff. There were always decisions to be made, schedules to adjust, the complex machinery of royal life that required constant attention. But today, Kate had managed to be present for her son's moment of triumph, and that felt like its own kind of victory. That evening, after dinner, the family gathered in the sitting room for what had become their new tradition. Kate would lie on the sofa, covered with the soft throw her mother had made years ago, while the children took turns reading aloud from their favorite books. Tonight was Charlotte's Choice, a story about brave princesses and magical kingdoms. As Charlotte's clear voice filled the room with tales of adventure and happy endings, Kate looked around at her family. William sat in his favorite chair, occasionally helping Charlotte with difficult words, but mostly just watching his wife and children with an expression of intense concentration, as if he were trying to memorize every detail. George lay on the carpet, supposedly too old for family story time, but unwilling to miss these precious moments. Louis curled up next to Kate on the sofa, his warm body pressed against her side. This was what mattered. Not the grand ceremonies or state occasions that would fill the history books, but quiet evenings when they were simply a family sharing stories and love. Kate had learned to treasure these ordinary moments, understanding finally that they were the most extraordinary gift of all. Later, after the children were in bed, Kate found herself in George's room. Her eldest son was lying awake, staring at the ceiling, and she could see the weight of knowledge in his young face. At 11, he understood more than his siblings about what was coming, and Kate knew he was carrying burdens that were too heavy for someone so young. "Can't sleep?" she asked, settling carefully on the edge of his bed. George shook his head, rolling over to face her. "Mom, are you scared?" The question caught her off guard with its directness. George had always been perceptive, but this level of emotional maturity was startling even for him. Kate considered lying, offering reassurance that everything would be fine. But she had committed to honesty with her children, age-appropriate, but truthful. Sometimes, she admitted, but not about the things you might think. "I'm not scared of being sick or of dying. I'm sad about missing parts of your life, about not being there to see you grow up and become the amazing man I know you'll be." George's eyes filled with tears, though he tried to blink them away. "Will you forget us?" "Oh, sweetheart," Kate said, gathering him into her arms despite the pain the movement caused. "I could never forget you. You're part of me, all three of you. You're in my heart and my soul, and that doesn't change even when people can't be together anymore." They held each other in the darkness, mother and son sharing a moment of profound connection. Kate felt George's body relax against hers as her words provided the comfort he needed. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. "I love you too, George. Always and forever." After settling George for the night, Kate made her careful way down the hall to check on Charlotte and Louis. Both were sleeping peacefully, their faces soft and untroubled in the gentle glow of their nightlights. Kate stood in each doorway for long minutes, drinking in the sight of her children at rest, storing these images for whatever came next. William was waiting for her in their bedroom, and Kate could see the question in his eyes, the same one he asked without words every night. How was she feeling? How much time did they have left? I think we should start talking about Christmas, she said instead of answering his unspoken question. I want to help plan it, even if I can't participate in everything. William's face went carefully neutral, the expression he wore when he was trying to control his emotions. Christmas was still 2 months away, and they both understood what Kate was really saying. She wanted to create one final perfect holiday for their children, regardless of whether she would be there to see it. What did you have in mind? He asked, following her lead and focusing on practicalities rather than dwelling on the implications. They stayed up late that night, planning a Christmas that would be both magical and meaningful. Kate wanted to write letters for each child to open Christmas morning, regardless of whether she would be there to watch. She wanted to help select gifts that would comfort them in years to come. She wanted to create traditions that would continue long after she was gone. As the clock struck midnight, marking another day in their countdown, Kate and William lay together in the darkness. Outside their window, London slept peacefully, unaware that in this quiet palace room, a family was learning that love was stronger than loss, that presence could transcend physical absence, and that some bonds were too deep for death to sever. Kate's breathing was becoming more labored, her body beginning the final phase of its battle. But her spirit remained strong, focused on the mission that had defined her life since becoming a mother, ensuring that her children knew they were loved beyond measure, no matter what the future might bring. The silent goodbye was almost complete, but the love that had inspired it would echo through generations, a testament to the profound power of a mother's devotion to her family.